The sun was shining brightly as the grand hall of the luxury hotel buzzed with excitement. Guests mingled, laughter echoed, and a soft melody played in the background. It was the perfect day for a wedding. But amidst all the celebration, there was one person who was less than thrilled. Mr. Harrison Montgomery, a powerful and wealthy businessman. Harrison had built his empire from the ground up, working tirelessly to secure his family's future. He had always believed that success meant wealth, power, and status, and he had passed on these beliefs to his only daughter, Olivia. For Olivia, life had always been about appearances, high society, and the right connections. But today, she was about to do something that would shock everyone, especially her father. Olivia had been seeing someone for a while, a man named Marcus Carter. Marcus wasn't from the world Olivia had always known. He didn't come from wealth, nor did he have a prestigious family name. In fact, he had grown up in a small neighborhood, far from the glittering world of luxury her father lived in. But to Olivia, it didn't matter. She loved him for who he was, not for what he had. The couple had met during Olivia's travels for work, and they instantly clicked. Marcus was kind, intelligent, and funny, and Olivia admired how grounded and genuine he was. However, Harrison was not happy when he learned about Marcus. To him, Marcus was nothing more than an outsider, someone who didn't belong in their world. Olivia, who had always been close to her father, felt torn. She knew how much her father's approval meant to her, but she also knew she couldn't ignore her own heart. After much thought, she made her decision. She was going to marry Marcus, no matter what her father thought. She had hoped her father would come to accept him, but deep down, she feared he wouldn't. As the day of the wedding drew closer, the tension between father and daughter grew. Harrison made it clear that he didn't approve of Marcus, and he wasn't shy about showing it. He even told Olivia that she was making a mistake, warning her that marrying Marcus would lead to regret. But Olivia was firm in her decision. On the morning of the wedding, Olivia stood in front of the mirror, wearing a beautiful white gown, and ran her fingers through her hair. She looked stunning, but there was an undeniable nervousness in her eyes. She could feel the weight of her father's disapproval on her shoulders. The day had arrived, and as Olivia prepared to walk down the aisle, her heart raced. She was excited to marry the man she loved, but she also knew her father would be watching closely. She wasn't sure how he would react when Marcus stood before him. Would he stay quiet? Would he cause a scene? All Olivia knew was that she had made her choice, and she wasn't backing down. In the back of her mind, she worried about the storm that was about to unfold, but she also hoped that maybe, just maybe, her father would see Marcus for the man he truly was, a man who loved his daughter deeply. As the guests took their seats and the ceremony began, the tension in the air was thick. Olivia took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready to face whatever came next. The wedding was about to begin, and little did she know, this day would be the start of an unforgettable story. The wedding venue was a magnificent sight. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceilings, and elegant floral arrangements decorated every corner of the room. The guests were settling in, talking amongst themselves, their excitement growing with each passing minute. But amidst all the glamour, Olivia felt the first wave of tension building in her chest. It wasn't just the wedding jitters. It was the unease she felt from her father's cold, judgmental attitude towards Marcus. She had always admired her father's success, but today she couldn't help but wonder how he could be so dismissive of the man she loved. Olivia's thoughts were interrupted when the doors at the back of the hall opened. It was time for Marcus to make his entrance. All eyes turned toward the entrance as Marcus walked into the room. He was dressed in a sharp, dark suit that fit him perfectly. His confident stride showed a man who was both composed and proud. Yet beneath that confidence, he couldn't shake the nerves. This wasn't just any normal wedding. It was a world of wealth, power, and status that he had never fully belonged to. Marcus took a deep breath, glancing around the room as he moved forward. There were whispers in the crowd, soft murmurings that floated through the air. People's eyes followed him, some curious, some skeptical, others simply confused. To them, Marcus didn't fit the image of what a groom should be. They had expected someone with a background more aligned with their elite world. He wasn't dressed in a designer label that they recognized, and his family's name wasn't one they had heard before. Harrison Montgomery, sitting proudly at the front of the hall, observed Marcus with sharp eyes. He had already made up his mind about the man standing before him. To Harrison, Marcus was an outsider, someone who had no place in his daughter's life. He couldn't understand why Olivia had chosen him. For Harrison, wealth was everything, and Marcus didn't seem to have much of it. As Marcus reached the front, he took a moment to greet Harrison with a firm handshake. His smile was genuine, but his nerves were starting to show. Harrison, however, barely smiled back. He looked at Marcus, sizing him up, as if trying to determine whether he was good enough for his daughter. His disapproval was evident, though he tried to hide it with a polite nod. Olivia, standing near the altar, couldn't help but feel her heart racing. She had seen the way her father looked at Marcus with so much disdain. It hurt her, but she kept her head high. She knew that Marcus wasn't the man her father had hoped for, but she also knew that he was the right man for her. As the ceremony began, Olivia noticed that Marcus was still trying to hold his ground. He wasn't letting the whispers and stares faze him. He stood tall, his hands slightly shaking, but his gaze never wavered. He was there for Olivia, and nothing else mattered. As they exchanged vows, Olivia couldn't help but look at Marcus with a mixture of love and gratitude. This man, who had been nothing but kind and supportive to her, was about to become her husband. The excitement she had felt earlier now mixed with a sense of determination. She wasn't going to let anything, especially her father's opinion, ruin this special day. The vows were simple but heartfelt. Marcus spoke with sincerity, promising to love and cherish Olivia for as long as they both shall live. And Olivia, with tears in her eyes, promised to stand by him no matter what. But as the ceremony continued, it was clear that Harrison's judgment was far from over. He had remained quiet for now, but Olivia knew he was waiting for the right moment to make his disapproval known. The tension was palpable, and the day's excitement began to feel overshadowed by uncertainty. The wedding wasn't just about celebrating love. It was now a battle between father and daughter, and neither was willing to back down. The atmosphere in the grand hall had changed. The soft music that had once filled the air now seemed distant, replaced by a sense of tension that could be felt by everyone. Olivia could feel her heart pounding in her chest as she stood beside Marcus, ready to take the next step in their lives together. She glanced at her father, who sat with his arms crossed, his face a mask of disapproval. The ceremony continued, but it was clear that Harrison was not fully present in the moment. His cold gaze never left Marcus, and Olivia could feel the weight of his judgment with every passing second. She had hoped that today would be a celebration of love, but instead it felt like a battleground, with her father standing as the judge, ready to make his verdict. As the officiant spoke, Marcus stood tall, but there was an underlying tension in his posture. He had never been one for grand displays or attention, and this wedding, surrounded by people who seemed to judge him at every turn, was no different. But he had made a promise to Olivia, and he wasn't about to let anything ruin this day for her. His eyes stayed focused on her, the love he felt for her shining through. Harrison, however, was not going to make this easy. He couldn't hold his feelings back much longer. As the officiant asked the couple if they were ready to exchange their vows, Harrison stood up. His voice, loud and firm, echoed through the hall. "Before you continue, I need to speak," he said, his eyes fixed on Marcus. The room went silent, and all eyes turned toward him. Olivia's heart skipped a beat. She had hoped this moment wouldn't come, but now it was clear that her father was about to make his disapproval known. "I don't believe this is the right decision for my daughter," Harrison continued, his voice steady but sharp. "You, young man, have no place in our world. You don't come from money. You don't have the background or the connections to offer her the life she deserves. This is not what I wanted for her. Olivia could feel her face flush with anger, but she kept her composure. She had heard her father's criticisms before, but today was different. Today was supposed to be about love, and she wasn't going to let her father's harsh words ruin it. Marcus, though visibly uncomfortable, didn't flinch. He had expected this moment, but it still stung to hear such harsh words. He looked at Olivia, silently asking if she was okay. She nodded, her eyes filled with determination. This was her choice, and she wasn't going to let her father's words make her second-guess it. The officiant, sensing the tension, tried to ease the situation. "Let's continue with the ceremony," he said, his voice calm but firm. "The vows are a promise between the two of you. Nothing else matters." Olivia took a deep breath and turned to Marcus. She had been dreaming of this moment for years, and despite her father's attempts to derail it, she wasn't going to let him take it away from her. "Marcus," she said softly, "I love you. Nothing else matters. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, no matter what anyone else thinks." Marcus smiled at her, his eyes filled with gratitude and love. "Olivia, I love you too. You are everything to me, and I will always stand by you, no matter the challenges we face." Their vows were simple, but the words were filled with sincerity. As they exchanged rings, Olivia felt a sense of relief wash over her. The ceremony was almost over, but there was still one more obstacle to face: her father. As the officiant declared them husband and wife, the room erupted into applause, but the tension in the air was far from gone. Harrison sat in silence, his face unreadable, as Olivia and Marcus shared their first kiss as a married couple. The ceremony may have ended, but the battle for acceptance was far from over. The reception hall was filled with laughter and music, but beneath the surface, the tension was far from over. Olivia and Marcus had just shared their first kiss as a married couple, and the applause was loud, but it felt hollow to Olivia. She tried to smile, to enjoy the moment, but her eyes kept glancing nervously at her father. Harrison's disapproval had not faded. If anything, it had only grown more obvious since the ceremony. As they made their way to the reception table, Olivia felt a pit in her stomach. She wanted to enjoy her wedding day, to celebrate with her friends and family, but her father's behavior was casting a shadow over everything. He sat at his table, with a stern look on his face, occasionally muttering to the people around him, clearly dissatisfied with how things were going. Marcus, on the other hand, remained calm. He kept his attention on Olivia, trying his best to keep her at ease. He knew her father's judgment would not end with the ceremony, but he had hoped that things might settle after the vows were exchanged. Unfortunately, that was not the case. As the evening wore on, Harrison could no longer hold back his disdain. He stood up, his voice carrying across the room, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Everyone," he began, his tone cold, "I've seen many things in my life, but this is something else. A man with no background, no wealth, no connections, marrying my daughter. This isn't just a disappointment, it's a mistake." The room went quiet. Olivia froze. Her heart sank as she heard her father's words. She had hoped for this day to be about love and happiness, but now it felt like her worst fears were coming true. Marcus, who had been sitting beside Olivia, clenched his jaw. He knew this moment was coming, but the sting of hearing such cruel words in front of so many people was still hard to bear. He looked at Olivia, her face pale with shock, and took her hand in his. He had expected her father to be disappointed, but this was more than he had imagined. The hurt in Olivia's eyes was all he needed to know. "Dad," Olivia finally said, her voice shaking but firm, "enough. You've made your point. I'm married to Marcus, and I love him. That's all that matters." Harrison's face twisted in frustration. "You love him," he repeated, as though the idea was impossible. "Do you honestly believe that a man like him can offer you a future? You deserve better than this, Olivia. You deserve someone who can match your status, your lifestyle." The guests at the table exchanged uncomfortable glances, some clearly unsure of how to react. Some of them were embarrassed by Harrison's words, while others were simply too afraid to speak out. It was clear to everyone in the room that the groom was not the one on trial here. It was Olivia's love for him. Olivia stood up, unable to hold back the tears that had been threatening to spill. She had always been close to her father, but today he was making it impossible for her to see him as the man who had always supported her. The father she once admired was now the one tearing her apart. "Dad," she said, her voice cracking with emotion, "I'm not asking for your approval anymore. I've made my choice. Marcus is the one I want to spend my life with. And if you can't accept that, then that's your problem, not mine." The words hung in the air. Silence fell over the reception. The guests were watching, waiting to see how Harrison would respond. Olivia's heart raced, her breath shallow as she looked at her father. She didn't know if he would change his mind, or if this was the moment that would break their relationship forever. But one thing was clear: she was not going to let him ruin her happiness. Harrison's face turned red with anger, but he remained silent, his gaze fixed on his daughter. Olivia could feel the weight of his judgment, but she was done letting it control her. Today was about love, and she was not going to let anyone, not even her father, take that away from her. The tension in the room was thick, and it seemed like time had come to a standstill. Harrison stood at the front of the room, his face twisted with frustration, while Olivia stood by her husband, Marcus, with a mix of anger and determination in her eyes. The guests exchanged awkward glances, unsure of what to say or do. It felt as if the whole celebration had turned into a battle, with no end in sight. Olivia felt her heart racing in her chest. She had always imagined this day as the happiest of her life, a day filled with joy, love, and laughter. Instead, it was becoming a painful reminder of how much her father's approval meant to him, and how little he cared about her own feelings. She had hoped he would come to accept Marcus over time, but now she was realizing that her father might never change. As the guests nervously watched, Marcus stood up beside Olivia, his hand gently gripping hers. He had taken the full force of Harrison's words, but he wasn't about to back down. He looked at Olivia, offering a small but reassuring smile. "Olivia," he said softly, "I think it's time for a little break. Let's step outside for a moment." Olivia nodded, grateful for the support. She could feel the pressure of the room weighing on her, and she needed a moment to breathe, away from the harsh judgment of her father. Together, they excused themselves and left the reception hall, stepping into the cool evening air outside. The garden outside the hotel was peaceful. The gentle sound of the wind rustling through the trees was a welcome change from the tension inside. Marcus and Olivia stood together, taking in the quiet for a moment. Olivia closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions that had built up inside her. "Are you okay?" Marcus asked, his voice full of concern. "You don't have to go through this alone." Olivia smiled weakly, her eyes still a little teary. "I don't know anymore. I never thought it would be this hard." She looked at him, her voice growing stronger. "But I'm not going to let my father tear us apart. You mean everything to me, Marcus. I'm sorry you had to experience that." Marcus pulled her into a gentle embrace, holding her close. "It's not your fault," he said. "I knew going in that your father might not be happy with me, but what matters is that you're with me. We'll get through this together." As they stood there in the quiet of the garden, Olivia realized something important. No matter what her father said, no matter how much pressure he put on her, she had found someone who loved her for who she was, someone who stood by her no matter what. Marcus had never asked for her father's approval, and in that moment, Olivia understood why. His love for her didn't depend on anyone else's approval. But just as the two of them were starting to find a moment of peace, they heard footsteps approaching. Olivia turned, and to her surprise, it was one of the hotel staff, looking a little out of breath. "Excuse me, Miss Montgomery," the staff member said hesitantly. "There's a call for Mr. Carter. It's urgent." Marcus raised an eyebrow in confusion. "A call? I wasn't expecting anything." The staff member handed him a phone, and Marcus took it, still unsure of what to expect. Olivia stood beside him, her curiosity growing. "Hello," Marcus said, answering the call. His face, once calm, now looked shocked, and Olivia could see that something unexpected was happening. "Mr. Carter," the voice on the other end of the line said, "we've just received word that your company's stock has skyrocketed. The value has increased by more than 30% overnight. You've made a fortune." Marcus's eyes widened, and Olivia's mouth dropped open in disbelief. Could this really be happening? The man she had married was not only successful, but his business was now making headlines. Olivia glanced at Marcus, her mind racing. What did this mean for their future? Would it change everything? As the call continued, Marcus looked at Olivia, a small smile forming on his face. This was a turning point, a moment that would change everything. Little did anyone in that room know, Marcus Carter was no ordinary man. He had kept his true status a secret until now. The evening was about to take an unexpected turn, and Harrison Montgomery's world was about to be shaken in ways he never imagined. The garden outside was peaceful, but Olivia could feel the excitement building inside her as Marcus hung up the phone. The air between them seemed to crackle with energy as Marcus turned to her, a mix of disbelief and excitement on his face. "Olivia," he began, his voice soft but full of wonder, "I need to tell you something. I've been keeping this from you because I didn't want it to change anything. But after what happened in there, it's time you knew the truth." Olivia looked at him, her heart racing. What could this be? What was Marcus hiding? She had always known that he wasn't from a wealthy background, but she never once judged him for it. To her, Marcus was the most important person in her life, and nothing about him had ever mattered more than his love and kindness. But now, standing here with him in the quiet garden, something had changed. "What is it, Marcus?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus took a deep breath and smiled at her, as if gathering strength. "The truth is, I'm not the man your father thinks I am," he said. "I don't come from a small background. I'm not just some random guy trying to marry into your family." He paused for a moment, allowing his words to sink in. "I'm the CEO of a tech company. We've been working on a new product, and just today, the company's stock skyrocketed. I'm worth far more than I ever let on." Olivia's eyes widened as the words hit her like a wave. CEO, tech company, stock market success. She had never in a million years guessed that Marcus was hiding such a huge part of himself. She had always thought of him as a humble man, someone with integrity and passion, but she had no idea he was such a powerful figure in the business world. "But why didn't you tell me?" Olivia asked, still trying to process what she had just heard. Marcus gave a soft laugh, but there was a trace of sadness in his eyes. "I didn't want anyone to think I was only after you for your family's money or status. I wanted to be with you because of who you are, Olivia. Not because of what your family has or what your father can offer. You deserve someone who loves you for you, not because of what they can get from you." Olivia stood there for a moment, completely stunned. She had known Marcus was an incredible person, but this was beyond what she had imagined. The man standing in front of her was someone who had worked hard, built an empire, and yet had kept it all hidden, not to impress anyone, but to keep their relationship genuine. She felt a rush of emotions flood through her: relief, admiration, and a deep sense of love. Olivia stepped closer to Marcus and took his hand in hers. "I don't care about your wealth, Marcus. I never did. What matters is that you're here with me. You've always been the person I've loved, no matter what." Marcus smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "I'm so glad you feel that way, Olivia. Because no matter what's happening around us, you're the one I want. You've always been my priority." Just then, the sound of footsteps reached their ears. They both turned around to see the hotel staff member walking toward them again. This time, the man looked even more urgent, his face a little pale. "Mr. Carter, Miss Montgomery, there's something you need to know," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "We've just heard that your father, Mr. Montgomery, has been talking to the media. He's been telling them that your wedding is a mistake, and he's questioning your decision to marry Marcus in front of the press." Olivia's heart dropped. She could feel the anger rising in her chest, but before she could speak, Marcus squeezed her hand gently. "It's okay, Olivia," he said, his voice calm. "This isn't the first time he's doubted me, and it won't be the last. But it's not going to stop us. I'll take care of it." Olivia nodded, her heart heavy. She had hoped that her father's disapproval would end, but it seemed that this was just the beginning of a much bigger battle. But now, more than ever, she knew one thing. She was ready to face whatever came next, with Marcus by her side. As the staff member walked away, Marcus turned to Olivia once again, his expression filled with quiet confidence. "No matter what your father says, we'll make it through this together. I'll protect you, Olivia. I always will." And as Olivia looked into his eyes, she knew he meant every word. Together, they could face anything. The night seemed to stretch on forever. Olivia and Marcus walked back into the reception hall, hand in hand. The music had softened, and the buzz of conversation had quieted. Most of the guests were still quietly watching, unsure of what would happen next. The tension in the air was palpable. Olivia's mind was racing, and her heart felt heavy with everything that had happened. She had never imagined her wedding day would be like this. What was supposed to be a day of love and celebration had quickly turned into a struggle for acceptance and understanding. Her father's harsh words still echoed in her mind. She had hoped he would come around, but instead, he had humiliated Marcus in front of everyone. She had stood up to him, but she knew the battle wasn't over. As they entered the hall, Harrison was sitting at his table, his arms crossed tightly. His eyes followed them as they walked toward the front of the room, but his expression was unreadable. Olivia felt a lump form in her throat. She had always respected her father, but right now she didn't know how to feel. Marcus, on the other hand, remained calm. He squeezed Olivia's hand as if to reassure her. He had known this day would be difficult, but he hadn't expected it to be quite like this. Still, he wasn't going to let her down. He wasn't going to let anyone ruin the love they had fought so hard for. "Olivia," Harrison finally spoke, his voice low but firm. "I need to speak with you. In private." The entire room seemed to hold its breath as Olivia glanced at Marcus. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she knew she needed to handle this. She had to face her father, no matter how painful it might be. "I'll be right back," she whispered to Marcus, giving him one last reassuring smile before walking over to her father. Harrison stood up as she approached. He looked at her with a mix of frustration and something else, something that looked like regret. Olivia couldn't tell if it was real, but she was willing to listen. "Sit down, Olivia," Harrison said, gesturing toward a chair beside him. Olivia sat down slowly, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. She couldn't look at her father, not yet. Not after everything he had said about Marcus. She had hoped he would come to understand, but now she wasn't sure if he would ever accept her choice. "I've been thinking," Harrison began, his voice softer now, "and I realize I've been wrong." Olivia's head shot up, surprised by his words. This wasn't what she had expected. He was apologizing. After everything. "I've always wanted the best for you, Olivia," Harrison continued, his voice faltering slightly. "I wanted you to have everything I never had. The right connections, the right opportunities, and I didn't think Marcus could give that to you." He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "But I see now that I've been foolish. Marcus is a good man. He's worked hard for everything he has. And if you love him, that's all that matters." Olivia felt a mix of emotions swirling inside her. Part of her wanted to cry from the relief of hearing her father admit that he had been wrong. Another part of her still felt hurt, knowing that it had taken so much for him to finally understand. "I'm sorry, Olivia," Harrison said quietly, his voice sincere. "I should have trusted you. You're my daughter, and I should have respected your choice. If Marcus makes you happy, Then I was wrong to stand in the way. Olivia looked at her father, her heart racing. She didn't know if this apology would be enough to heal the hurt from all the harsh words he had spoken earlier, but it was a start. It was a step in the right direction. "I appreciate your apology, Dad," she said softly. "It means a lot to me. But it's not just about Marcus. It's about me too. I need you to trust me. I need you to see that I can make my own choices, even if they're not what you would have wanted." Harrison nodded slowly, his eyes filled with regret. "I understand, Olivia. I was wrong. I should have trusted you more." After a long silence, Olivia stood up. "Thank you, Dad," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "It's a start." As she walked back to Marcus, Olivia felt a weight lift from her shoulders. There was still a long road ahead, but today had been a turning point. She had stood by the man she loved, and now maybe her father was beginning to see him for who he truly was. Marcus stood as she approached, his eyes full of concern. Olivia smiled at him, her heart full. "He's sorry, Marcus. I think he's finally starting to understand." Marcus's face softened as he took her hand. "That's all I ever wanted. For him to see that I'm not here to take anything from you. I just want to be with you." Olivia squeezed his hand, a sense of peace finally settling over her. They had made it through the hardest part, and with each other's support, they could face whatever came next. The night felt different now. The tension that had once clouded the air had begun to lift. Olivia and Marcus stood side by side, their hands still tightly clasped. It was hard to believe that just hours earlier, their wedding day had seemed like it was falling apart. But now, with Harrison's apology, things were starting to shift. Maybe not everything would change overnight, but for the first time, Olivia felt like they could truly start a new chapter. As the evening wore on, the mood in the room started to shift. The guests, who had been quiet, unsure of how to react to the drama that had unfolded, slowly began to relax. Some even came up to Olivia and Marcus to offer their congratulations, expressing how happy they were that the two of them had found each other. Olivia smiled, feeling the warmth of their support. It wasn't the perfect wedding she had imagined, but it was becoming something better, something real. "I can't believe this is actually happening," Olivia said, her voice filled with wonder as she glanced at Marcus. Marcus laughed softly, squeezing her hand. "I know. I thought we were going to have to cancel the whole thing after your dad's speech." Olivia smiled at him, the memory of the harsh words still fresh in her mind. But now, she could look back at it with a sense of relief. She had stood by Marcus, and now they were stronger for it. "It's crazy, but I wouldn't have changed a thing. We've made it through the hardest part, and now we can enjoy the rest of our lives." Marcus nodded. "We will. I promise you, Olivia, this is just the beginning for us." As the evening went on, Olivia looked over at her father, who was now talking with some of the guests. He had apologized, yes, but Olivia knew it would take time for things to completely heal. The hurt wasn't gone, but it was starting to fade. She had a feeling that her father would come around eventually. It wasn't going to be easy, but she was willing to fight for her family and for Marcus. Later in the evening, the music picked up again, and the dance floor filled with guests. Olivia and Marcus stood on the edge of the room, watching as everyone laughed and danced. The night had become a celebration, not just of their marriage, but of new beginnings and forgiveness. Olivia leaned her head against Marcus's shoulder, feeling completely at peace for the first time that day. "Thank you for being so patient with me, with everything that's happened today." Marcus kissed her forehead gently. "There's nowhere else I'd rather be than here with you. We've got each other, and that's all that matters." As the final song played, Marcus gently pulled Olivia onto the dance floor. The guests cheered as they danced together, their hearts light and free. The world outside the wedding hall might have been full of challenges, but in this moment, Olivia felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. When the song ended, Marcus leaned in close, his voice low but full of meaning. "I meant what I said earlier. You're the only one I want. There's nothing in this world that will change that." Olivia smiled, her heart full. "And I'm never going to let you go." They stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, surrounded by the love and warmth of their family and friends. The challenges they had faced that day were behind them now. There would still be obstacles ahead, but together, Olivia and Marcus knew they could face anything. It wasn't just the wedding that marked the beginning of their journey together. It was the promise they had made to each other, a promise of love, trust, and the belief that no matter what life threw their way, they would face it together, stronger than ever. As the night came to a close, Olivia and Marcus stepped outside into the cool night air, the stars twinkling above them. They were ready to start their new life, side by side, and no one, not even her father, could take that away from them. Their love was all that mattered, and with each other, they knew they could conquer anything. The morning after their wedding was peaceful. The bright sunlight streamed through the windows of the hotel room, and Olivia and Marcus sat together on the balcony, sipping coffee and watching the world wake up. It was a quiet, perfect moment, one they hadn't had the chance to enjoy the day before, with all the drama and emotions swirling around them. For Olivia, it was hard to believe that just one day ago, everything had felt uncertain. She had feared her father's harsh words might tear her and Marcus apart, but now, with the apology behind them, she felt more sure of her choices than ever before. She knew that Marcus was the man she wanted to spend the rest of her life with, and now she didn't have to worry about her father's disapproval anymore. Marcus glanced at Olivia, his face relaxed, but there was something different in his eyes, something deeper. He had been so patient throughout the whole ordeal, but now it felt like they were stepping into a new phase of their relationship. No longer was their love shadowed by fear or doubt. Instead, they could finally begin their journey together, free to live their lives as a united front. "I can't believe we're finally married," Olivia said with a smile, looking out at the view. Marcus chuckled softly, setting his coffee cup down. "It feels unreal, doesn't it? But I'm so glad we're here. This is just the beginning of something amazing." Olivia nodded, her heart full. "I know. There's so much ahead of us. And no matter what, we're in this together." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the past few days starting to settle. Despite everything that had happened, Olivia realized how lucky she was. She had found someone who truly understood her, who respected her choices, and who would always be there to support her. For the first time in a long while, Olivia felt completely at peace with her decision. Later that afternoon, Olivia and Marcus decided to take a walk through the nearby park. The sun was shining brightly, and there was a light breeze that made the trees sway gently. It was a day full of promise, and Olivia couldn't help but feel excited for what lay ahead. The road to their happiness had been rocky, but now it seemed like everything was falling into place. As they walked, Olivia's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, expecting a message from one of her friends or family members. But instead, it was a text from her father. "I know I've made mistakes. I'm sorry for everything, Olivia. I want to make things right. I love you." Olivia's heart swelled at the message. It was short and simple, but it meant the world to her. She had been afraid that things between her and her father would never be the same. But now, it seemed like they were beginning to heal. The door to their relationship wasn't closed. It was just starting to open again. Marcus noticed the change in her expression and smiled. "Is everything okay?" Olivia nodded, showing him the message. "He's finally starting to come around. I think we can rebuild our relationship." Marcus squeezed her hand gently. "I'm happy for you. But remember, no matter what happens with your dad, I'm always here. We've got each other." Olivia smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. Marcus had never once doubted her, and now, as they walked hand in hand, she knew that their love was stronger than anything that had tried to stand in their way. As the evening came, they returned to their hotel, feeling lighter and more connected than ever. They had faced so many challenges together, and now They were ready to start this new chapter in their lives. It wasn't just about the wedding or the approval of others. It was about the bond they shared. Their love had proven to be unshakable, and Olivia was finally ready to embrace whatever the future held. With Marcus by her side, she knew they could face anything. They were ready for their next adventure, and this time, nothing could stop them. They had their love, their trust, and each other, and that was all they needed. Together, they would face whatever came next, with hearts full of hope and a future full of possibility. And as the night ended, they knew they had already begun living the life they had always dreamed of, together.